Good morning, good afternoon. Welcome everyone online. I'd like to welcome everyone to the Spring 2026 Allotrope Connect meeting. Just checking online quick for audio. Good, Jamie? All right, awesome. Let's get started. So for those who are able to come in person, welcome to life. We're really happy to be here. Our host, Johnson & Johnson, and the ECC, thank you very much for welcoming us. So I think always as we're always constantly in Allotrope trying to drive forward, it's always good to kind of remind ourselves where we've been quickly. So if you think about the theme for this meeting, really what we've been focusing on for a number of years is the Allotrope standard. And we'll go through that in a moment, a bit of a refresher for everyone. But the whole intent is standardized data is as we all intuitively know, good quality data helps us do AI, right? It's actually a general truth. If you don't, that doesn't make sense to you, then no, probably not the right people, right? But that generally makes sense to you. We know that, again, data standards hopefully allow us to drive those insights. However, the reality to this point has been, I think we've made strides as a community over the years in our representations that we'll talk about in a moment, but still it's just too slow. And at our last gathering, hosted by our friends at Biorad, we started to get in this habit of every 6 months or so putting a challenge question out. So the challenge question that we put out at that meeting was, well, the actual process of standardization, how do we actually speed that along? And not only how do standardized data help us do AI, but how does AI actually help us standardize data? So that was the question that we put out to the community. And I'm happy to say that today's report out will be, well, we've been active as a community over the last 6 months, and we will talk about today a lot of exciting things I think that have happened in the last 6 months or so to actually show how AI is actually helping us with the active standardization. The agenda, just in summary, hopefully that's the reason why everyone is here. You're going to see over the next 2 days, the first day, the focus of the agenda is really on that first topic. How are AI tools and automation tools in general helping us with our standardization journey? So you'll see a series of speakers from different organizations, members of the community, and members who are not a part of the community. We'll fix that. As talking about how they're using some portion of Allotrope technology or standards in general to enable their work, but then also increasingly you'll see a theme going through here of how folks have started to leverage the incredible power of AI to actually solve that challenge that was on the prior slide. So we'll go through those during the course of the day, those presentations. And then for day two, we'll switch gears a little bit. One of the priorities that Allotrope decided on about a year and a half ago was to start also diversifying the data types that we would standardize. Obviously, as everyone I think knows well, we've been standardizing instrument results data for a number of years. We have quite a collection of converters that are available that some of that AI automation you'll see applied to today. But also we've been starting to diversify into other data types on the premise that connected data that's created with a common ontology underpinning is going to be easier data to work with. So you'll see a series of expansions that we've consciously been making over the last few months into the digital analytical method space. First model released this past quarter. And we'll talk about some of the work we're doing for what we're calling the connected domains model that we'll be releasing in the second quarter. And we'll talk about that in depth tomorrow. And then talk about all the different projects that we can possibly do with this connected information. And at the end of both days, you'll see intentional, hopefully the agenda for the day leads us to a series of ideation questions. The first day, should probably go back. The first day, the question I'd like to hopefully drive towards as today's conversations go on is we'll talk about all the things we are doing, but what can we be doing pre-competitively to help converge AI and data standardization and drive even more value based on what you're seeing today? What are the right things to do as a community? And then day two, leveraging all that we've talked about on hopefully on day one is as we start presenting these, I'll call them higher order ASM models that start to aggregate different information types. how do we think about how we can use ASMs, not just as that semantic object coming out of your instrument, but how do we think about it in terms of our what's possible with our data strategy, creating semantic layers, data products, et cetera? If you actually have a blueprint for creating a semantically connected world, what should we be doing as a community together to simplify what we're doing with data? Things never sit still. So we're here today, but let's think about the next Allotrope meeting. So just mark your calendars. It's hosted at USP in October. Again, I'm not sure yet. Things will adjust to be adapted to what we hear today. So I believe, based on what I hope we accomplished today, we'll be talking about in the fall some of these great projects for the connected domains and analytical method models. So different data types connected, driven, of course, by AI, and really start to drive towards those data consumption pieces and asking those bigger questions of what are the most important things that we can do to ultimately get to the end of the day. The end of the day is not standardization, right? That's a means to an end. It's how do we get the most out of AI? How do we create trustworthy predictions that help us get more value from our data? That's where we're trying to get. How do we make better decisions? I think that will probably be the theme in the fall. Okay, so I volunteered to do an abbreviated version of the Allotrope Foundation introduction because I realize we do have some new members from the community. So this is not the long, this is the 5-minute version of what, for those who are newer to the community, who is the Allotrope Foundation today. We just recently have become a 501c6 organization, and we are essentially a consortium that is attempting to realize the vision of fair data through data standardization. We have members ranging from pharma to instrument vendors, software providers, and a series of nonprofit organizations. So this is who we are today. We have organization, a board of directors, executive committee, and you'll meet today throughout the course of the day our product team who are here with us today, who do all the heavy lifting within Allotrope. The SMEs that we work with from all of your organizations. Generally, the work that the product team does is with those experts through working groups. So you hear a lot about working groups. And as over the course of the last several years, we're proud that we've really put together a very consistent governance process that produces quarter releases with consistent automation, QA workflows. So when you think about Allotrope in summary, what should you be thinking about? Hopefully, first and foremost, when we start at the upper left-hand corner, Allotrope is us. So it's a community. The standard we were looking back historically, over 60 organizations have, significantly contributed to the Allotrope standard over the years through various work on working groups. So it's basically a community project. There's a series of technologies that we'll talk about here briefly in a moment. The underpinning of all that we do are ontologies. So you'll hear a lot about AFO, Allotrope Foundation ontologies during the course of the day. You'll hear about 2 different data representations. One called the Allotrope Simple Model, which is a JSON-based representation that uses the ontologies. And you'll also hear about a representation we've had for a number of years called ADF, Allotrope Data Format, which is a binary container which is used for long-term data preservation. And you'll hear some suggestions from Heiko, I think he's here somewhere, today, maybe of what we could possibly be doing in the future with ADF format. Again, you'll hear about a lot of automation through our DevOps. Again, we are a consortium, but we're not a consortium that talks about doing things. We're a consortium that does things. So we actually produce a product with regular QA workflows that are executed every quarter, and we are a community that really is very interested in partnering with other organizations and running projects, whether it's within the members of the community or externally with other organizations. And we have representatives from Stoya Alliance today to talk about one of those such projects. So again, AFO and ASM, again, just a primer for those who aren't as familiar. What are these 2 terms? AFO, the Allotrope Foundation ontologies. that's essentially the ontology backbone that defines and classifies all the terms that we use in all of our models and reuse. It assigns unique identifiers and follows public standards for ontologies. ASM is a JSON-based human and text format, human readable and machine readable, that takes those ontologies and reuses them over and over in consistent modeling patterns, such that you can think about the ASM, the overused analogy of Lego blocks, but we'll do it again. You can think about it as essentially a modular kit for building, for modeling whatever it is that you're trying to model. The terms are, as you mentioned, are reused. They're publicly available through services like BioPortal and other ontology lookup services. And they are reused over and over in these modular blocks that you see repeating themselves in models over and over. And so in that way, you assemble together a model reusing parts over and over. And as we've been working at this with our product team over the last few years, we've built a lot of those patterns and a lot of those reusable blocks. So it allows us every quarter to go faster into new spaces until we run into a new data type where new patterns need to be designed, and then we have to pause and figure out those patterns. But if it's reusing the pieces, we just compose solutions from previously existing models. The Allotrope data format, as I mentioned, this is our first representation. Again, it's a format in a binary container that has a lot of really interesting, powerful components, data description, data cubes for representing data, and a data package for putting lots of other information that you might want to associate in this container. It has been used in several organizations as a long-term archiving or data preservation format. And again, I won't jump into any of these present topics now because I want to save that for the speakers. But there's some ideas of maybe what the next phase of this format this data representation could look like for the community that we'll be talking about. So where are we in our product journey? Again, we've gone through a few different representations. We've kept the ontologies as the underpinning, the backbone that ties together the various representations. And about a year ago or so, we, as a community, said these are the things that we're going to focus on. We're going to focus on moving across different data domains and ensuring connectivity there, continuing to increase automation, pushing the boundaries with AI, starting to look for infrastructure solutions that allow everyone to scale. Standard's only a standard, it's only useful if people are using it. So we wanted to help scale the AFO and ASM pattern, look for collaborations, and also look for federations of what we're doing with other great work in pre-competitive space, because together we can certainly do more as a community, as an extended community. Ultimately, towards the goal of not losing sight, this is all not about standardizing data. That's a means to an end. It's about getting generating greater business value. So our goal as a community through this journey, we've tried to experiment and learn. We've tried to simplify and adopt through moving to ASM, and now it's really time to expand and try to be in a positive way disruptive. So this leads towards the last bit I wanted to just quickly go through for you. Again, for those who aren't as familiar with what Allotrope is doing right now, what does our roadmap look like? And certainly, members of the product team are here. Feel free to add comments as you see fit. So using the simplest themes I pulled on from the previous slide, you'll see mentioned on each slide. These are the things that in recent release and upcoming releases, these are the sorts of things. I won't go through them in great detail, but it'll give you a flavor of what is Allotrope focusing on right now. So in the theme of trying to generate that at scale, fair and normalized data, you can see the models that were released in the first quarter for a series of different techniques and interim results, the things that we're doing, continuing to modularize as necessary our existing models for Q2. Another series of techniques, many of these working in collaboration. The affiliation is in brackets with my organization, Sharp Dome, for some projects that we're implementing, but other organizations as well. And also we'll talk in future slides about some of the connected domains model as well. You can see other models that we're considering coming up in the future. So we continue to build out models in areas that folks need for their projects. So looking at the collaboration and connectivity in Q1, as I mentioned, we released the digital analytical method model, which we'll hear a lot about in a little bit tomorrow, actually, and the connected domains model, which we'll also hear about tomorrow. Again, these are those models that start to aggregate and show the connections between the smaller ASM models that are outputs of any individual instrument or method, et cetera. And these typically, as typical with Allotrope, our first models, especially in new areas like this, come out as what we call candidate recommendations. Essentially, our first version of the model for the community to weigh in, test out. And then once we've gotten some feedback, we've made some necessary adjustments, then we'll move those models to the final recommended status for the community. So continuing to expand and connect. In terms of infrastructure, the other presentations that you'll hear about today is starting a certification program. Ben Wilford-Lim will tell you all about that in a little bit this morning, as well as some guidance we've given the community on extending ASMs. There's a concept of the core ASM structure, the schema that you'll find in the Allotrope publications, but often folks feel a need to put additional content beyond that core scheme into the model. So we'll talk some more about that as well. And that certification program is in a pilot right now, as many of these other extension guides and design principles that are coming out. So you'll see over the first half of the year, we've made a concerted effort to get some of this guidance out because we have that really good problem of more and more folks are using ASM. So we want to make sure that everyone understands what the goals are for ASM so that we're all using the technology consistently. In terms of collaboration and federation, there's some work that has started and been ongoing in the background for the last few quarters across the organizations you see here. We're creating ontologies for, in general, laboratory and CMC space. And this team has put together an initial work plan that's sharing a lot of information across. And the goal of this is ultimately, we're all creating ontologies. The ontologies have lots of overlap in places, lots of places where we can work together. And we'd like to try to work as much as possible as an extended community, share information, of course, but also have as much as humanly possible, a common roadmap where we're not all working on similar domains, similar ontologies that overlap. It would be much more productive if we all work together and just make sure all of our work is added. So more coming in this space, hopefully as the year goes on, to try to federate all those ontologies that are out there publicly so you can use them all. And then also just a few items that we noted in the open source space as well. As I think folks are aware, there's a repository called Allotrope that Benchling started, a Python library of converters. So how do you move from your Allotrope schema to actually converting native files into ASM format? That is out there in the public space. And also OPC Labs has an ecosystem of projects also to take the communication protocol OPC and embed the Allotrope format in there as well. So there are two open source projects that you certainly are free to use some of the materials from. And also in a similar theme of open source, but also AI enablement, there have been, in the last few quarters, there have been some announcements as well. AWS has an Allotrope MCP server that's available and published for you. So if you want to use the protocol to direct your traffic to your LLM of choice, that is out there for your use. And also Anthropic recently created a series of bioresearch plugins. So they've essentially created skills for Claude, for their LLM And so those are also available for you as well. You may have noticed some of the work we'll certainly talk about here today has been leveraging Claude. That Claude seems to know something about Allotrope. Well, there's a reason why he knows something about it. So we'll just then pause there and see if there are any questions